Wow, it is episode 400. Welcome to this episode. I remember 2 years ago, and 2 years and 10 months ago actually, I spoke to my mentor and said that I was keen to launch the podcast. 400 episodes later, and it feels fantastic. I tell you what, I remember actually launching, and we were going in March 2020, we went into lockdown around the world. And then I said to my mentor and his team, I want to get going real quick. And so in June 2020, we launched the podcast. And you know what? Today is a time to celebrate. And I want to share the major themes that have come through from interviewing leaders around the globe. The ability to celebrate is really important for us as leaders, as individuals. We need to make sure we're doing this often. Too many of us are actually too busy, or we think we're too busy and we're moving on to the next thing and we're not taking time out to celebrate. So it's really important that we do that. So let's talk about these themes that are coming through and celebrate at the same time. Let's discuss.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to the Ask Denis episode number 400. That is so exciting to be able to say that number. This is a freestyle episode where I am asked a question by our listeners or share my thoughts, experiences, and insights from working with many leaders around the globe. It's great to have you here with me today, and thank you for being with me on this special episode. Think about the journey with my voice 6 years ago when I had the tumor removed, came back as being benign, and I sort of got my voice back and sort of given a second chance in life as well, because that tumor was benign. Then today, recording and releasing episode 400, it's just really exciting. Thousands and thousands of downloads around the globe. People sending me messages from around the world saying, hey, I'm in this country, this is what I'm doing right now, listen to your episode, and this is what I'm getting out of it. Or send me messages saying, hey, this is what your podcast is doing for me, for my team and my organization. You know what? There are several reasons why I wanted to start the podcast. One in particular was that I wanted my voice to be heard. So you think about that tumor journey. A voice of impact is really what I wanted to have. I wanted to have the guests that I interview, their voice to be heard. And I want you as the listeners to have a tool or a platform that you can use to help develop your voice. Our voice is really important, and the ability to have a voice is vital. I see too many people holding back as they feel their voice won't be heard, or that they may say a dumb thing or an idea. Here's a good example of that happening. How many times have you been in a meeting? You want to ask a question and think that it might be a dumb one, so I will wait. You get anxious or nervous about the question, so you don't ask it. Should I ask? What if? And then you decide not to. Then a few minutes later, someone else asks the question and you say to yourself, damn, I wanted to ask that question. Why didn't I? Well, you need to be bold and have courage to have a voice and use that voice to be influential. You see, leadership is influence. Today, I really want to share with you some of the themes that came through from the interviews that I've done with the guests over the last sort of 400 episodes. There are a lot of themes, but these are sort of the major ones that have come up. Number one is consistency. Being consistent with everything you do, and I mean everything. The number of people who have a great idea, start something, and don't follow it through, or if it gets too hard, they quit. Messaging is a good example. Keep the messaging the same. Heck, some of you aren't even speaking or giving messages at all. Whatever it is, and whatever you're doing, keep doing it consistently. The podcast is a great example. There's about 2 million podcasts globally. 90% of the podcasts don't get past episode 7. That's 1.8 million of them have already quit after up to episode number 7. Of the 200,000 left, 90% of them will quit after episode 20. So that's another 180,000 gone. To be in the top 1% of podcasts in the world, you need to publish 21 episodes, and you need to have a lot of engagement and traction and people rating and putting reviews and downloading your episodes. So that was number 1, is consistency. That's probably one of the biggest feedbacks that I've actually had from people in relation to a lot of things I've done in my life and in business and so forth, but also with this podcast. People just are admiring and just are in awe, actually, and saying to me, can't believe how consistently you are delivering these episodes. Number 2 is being real. People, in particular employees, want leaders to be real. Get out from behind the mask that we call as manager or leader. Stop trying to be something that you're not. Be you and be real. Number 3 is about being transparent. People can see right through you. They have this thing called a BS radar, and some of the people will call you out if you're not being transparent. If you can't tell people due to some confidentiality, then be upfront and tell them that you can't say it yet. It's better than you trying to make it up on the spot, or you're trying to hide something, because people can see through that. You will lose trust and credibility if you're not being transparent. It takes a long time to build that trust and credibility, but you can lose it within seconds. Number 4 is about being authentic. People can tell if you are authentic or not. People don't care about you and your title. They only care about you and your title once they understand that you care about them. And when they know that you care about them, they're going to go the extra mile for you. It says a lot about a person who is being authentic. It shows strength and maturity. Number 5 is what I call listening. No, I mean really listening to people. Being present and listening to people is key. You know what? Too many people are out there with their phones and their tablets, their computers, and they're being distracted. Don't be distracted. It's important for us to actually make sure that we're there with people and we are present. I mean, you might actually learn something from people as well, right? So really listen to what they're saying, but also really listen to what they're not saying. Number 6 is being world-class. That's being on the cutting edge. Make sure that you are staying relevant and not being left behind. Too many people are developing themselves. They're not going out there reading enough, listening enough to podcasts or audible books and so forth. Make sure you are staying on the cutting edge, that you're reading articles or you're reading white papers, you're understanding, you're out there networking with the industry or within your organization and in the industry and outside the industry. Make sure you're meeting people and you're learning from them. Because you see, change is constant, and we need to be changing with the times. There is so much technology out there, platforms out there, information out there, that we all can learn a lot. Now be aware of the noise, because there is a lot of noise out there. Cut the noise out and focus on what you're wanting to do, and make sure you get that across the line. And number 7 here is, we have the title of the episode, which is called Leadership is Changing. When I've asked my guests about that title, what it means to them, most of them say, oh, it's a great title, it's really relevant and so forth. And then some of them have said it needs to change. No, not the title needs to change. The fact that leadership overall needs to change. And it needs to change for us to be able to go forward as a human race and in business and so forth. You see, things are getting faster, and the way that we are working is changing all time. My question to you as a listener and a leader is, how are you showing up as a leader? What are you doing on a daily basis to consistently show up as a leader? One that people want to follow. One that organizations want you to lead them. One that is a multiplier, not a diminisher. By the way, there's a great book out there, if you haven't already got it, called Multipliers. Make sure you get that. Because you see, we as leaders need to help people flourish and strive to new levels. Are you a leader that's showing up that's one that's got an awesome attitude, that's positive and has heaps of energy? One that has a strong leadership presence? You know what? There have been some really interesting guests that I've had on the show, and I've been doing some of the mashups of late to really help you get a taste of the episodes so you can listen to them. Perhaps you've you're wanting to know a little bit more about what the episode's about, that's what that mashup does. It sort of gives you a little bit of a taste, and then you can go off and listen to it. For some of you, you may have heard the episode a while ago, but it's also giving you now a reminder about the actual episodes and going back and revisiting it. You know what? I listen to the episodes all the time, and I keep re-listening to them because I keep getting new insights coming out of it. And I'm the guy that interviewed them. It's more about the student being ready, right? And the teacher or the message will appear. Then there's all the Ask Denis episodes we want to go and listen to as well, where I've taken certain topics and so forth, and that's really quite key to actually help develop you as a leader. Going forward, I'm going to have one more wonderful guest lined up to interview. And I've got some ideas about new topics to cover that can help you and your teams. But I'm going to ask you as listeners to do a few things for me, please. And here we go. First of all, please let me know if you've got any questions or topics that you would like me to cover off on the Ask Denis Freestyle episode. Now, what we're wanting to do is to get the podcast to have a great showing or great visibility out there in the marketplace. Even though there is certain 1% of actual podcasts out there, but there is a lot, and it's quite busy. So if we can get you to help us lift the profile of the podcast, that would be great. One way of doing that is to actually put a rating and a review. So if you're on Apple and you listen to this on Apple, then put a 5-star rating and write some words if that's what you think is appropriate. If you're on Spotify and you're listening to this, you can only put a rating on the podcast. You can't put a review. This is going to, as I said, really help with the podcast visibility and get people to actually listen to it. But also, if you can share the podcast with your family and friends and network, that'll be really important, because you see, as they start to listen to them and they may subscribe to the podcast, it starts to download them. And if we start to download them in the rankings, it's actually going to help the podcast go higher in the rankings, right? And I know that in New Zealand, as an example, under the management category, it was number 1. And I know when it happened, I was actually sleeping, it was in the middle of the night, and we released an episode, and the guest actually shared with their network, and it went number 1 in New Zealand, which was pretty cool. But I never got to do the screenshot, which was really, really quite sad. But it's okay. I know we can do it again, which will be very helpful. You can find the podcast on most major platforms around the globe. Hey, I want to thank a few people. First of all, to you as the listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for the great messages of encouragement or insights that you're getting from actually listening to the podcast, or how the podcast is actually helping you. I really appreciate you actually sending me them, because you know what? At times, it just really, really helps the whole journey as we go through it. Next is the guest that I interview. Thank you for bringing so much to the recording, such rich insights and wisdom and knowledge. The listeners are really loving what you are sharing, and it's great to have you and partner with you as a guest on the podcast. To my mentors, thank you so much. You are consistently by my side, you encourage me, and I watch you consistently reaching new levels with your own podcast globally as global leaders. You are leading from the front, which is awesome, and I'm so proud of you. To the support team, the production team, the graphic design team, thank you for your professionalism and your willingness to help. It's awesome. And it's just great to be able to have a partner like you beside me and helping bring this podcast to life. To my darling Mary, thank you so much for always being there and supporting me, even giving me advice or telling me, nah, that's a stupid title, go and change it, this is a better one. And I love that, because I know that you've got my best interests at heart, and we do this together, and it's really, 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 really cool to do it with you. So I love you, and thank you so much for being there to help me. Now, listeners, if you would like to start a podcast, then feel free to reach out to me, and let's have a chat about how I can help you. I know that there's several of you who are wanting to actually do this, and people are asking me all the time, how do you start a podcast? I wanted to start a podcast, and I'm thinking of doing these things as well. So reach out to me on social media or my email, which will be in the show notes, Denis@leadingchangepartners.com. All right, listeners. Well, that's the celebrating of episode 400. It's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for joining me on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.